Hello, can you hear me? All right, well, welcome everyone to our presentations today. We're actually not scheduled to start the presentations until about 1:10. So you're going to have to listen to me for a few minutes to talk about some of the history of Nantucket, of the Nantucket Project Center. Some of you may know, because I think many of you have been to previous presentations, we've been doing projects on Nantucket since 2008. We took a year off in 2009. We managed to struggle through the pandemic and actually did some projects remotely during that period. So in total, we've now done 89 projects and 320 students have been through here. Some of you remember the projects that we've done, and you probably have favorites. We like to think that we've contributed to life on Nantucket in various ways, aside from students eating an awful lot of subs from Walters and so forth. But we've had projects that have done everything from developing the Cultural District's website. We developed the big Moby sculpture for recycling and trash that was down at Surfside. What else have we done? We did an evaluation of town facilities, and we like to think that, you know, these projects, some projects have more impacts than others, and the impacts often take a fair amount of time to show up. We had a project looking at town facilities, and then as a result of that, the town subsequently hired a facilities manager. We had a couple of projects with the fire department in the past. And I know at one of the town meetings where they were trying to get money for this beautiful building we're in now, they actually used some of the data that the students had gathered on a previous project. So, as I say, we like to think that we're contributing to life on Nantucket in various ways. And we're glad that the projects have impact. Obviously, one of the major impacts that the projects have is the impacts on our students. The projects are designed, some people ask, why do you do these kinds of projects? They don't look like engineering projects. Some look more like engineering projects than others, but many of them look more like social science type projects. And the reason that we do this, this is a requirement for students at WPI in their third year, so they're all juniors. And the projects we've been doing since 1970. Our first project center was in Washington, DC. It's still going. Second project center was in London, which is the other project center that I run. And we now have, depending how you count it, about 45 project centers all over the world. So we're sending almost 90% of students in their junior year somewhere in the world. Some students, about 10% of students choose to stay on campus for various reasons, but about 90% of them go off campus, somewhere else in the US or other parts of the world. So it's, needless to say, a very popular program. But the idea is going back to the 70s when WPI developed what was called the plan. It was a shift project-based learning. And the idea was that students would go and interact in a collaborative fashion, conducting research with host organizations of one sort or another. And so they have an academic component, but they're meant to be policy or world related, I mean, related to the real world. And the idea is to get our students to tackle a problem that might have a greater or smaller technical component, but is very much getting them out in the community, interacting with professionals, interacting with members of the public, to learn the kind of people skills that will be useful to them when they graduate. And one of the skills that they learn, as you all know, is working as a team. So typically we have students working in teams of 4. This year we have 5 teams. We've got 1 3-person team, but usually 3 or 4 person students, 3 or 4 students to a team. And that's so they can learn how to interact with each other as a team to a common goal. We expressly mix up their disciplines, so they're interdisciplinary teams. We try to avoid having all computer science majors on one team, because the idea is that people come with a different skill set, different mindset, and approach a problem in a different way. So anyway, how are we doing for time? I've been director of Nantucket Project Center since 2009. Actually, Mike Elms, one of my colleagues, started the Project Center in 2008, and then he ran off and started a Project Center in New Zealand, so won't go into that. I do specialize in islands, so I do the Project Center in London, and I do the Project Center here. And it's been a delight working with all of you and all of the students over the years. Anybody who's interested in doing a project next year, I'm always happy to hear whatever ideas you have. You can contact me by email at WPI, just golding@wpi.edu. I'm always happy to take any ideas that people might have. I typically come over mid-May to meet with as many people as I can to see what projects people are interested in doing for the following fall. So as I say, anybody who's interested, please do get in touch. I'm happy to consider any and all projects. The one thing that we don't do is we don't do projects with individuals. We do projects with a host organization. So you really have to have a sort of institutional structure. We want our students to be part of that institutional structure and have the opportunity to interact with other people in the host organization. But we don't do projects for individual people. We typically don't do projects for the private sector. So we're usually working with non-profits, government agencies, and the like. On Nantucket, so as I say, we've done 89 projects, 320 students since 2008. Those projects break down into about 60% of the projects we've done with one town, department or office or another. About 30% of the, about 10% of them have been with museums. So the Whaling Museum, Mariah Mitchell, and I'm hoping actually next year we'll have a project with the Shipwreck Museum too. So try and tap into all the museums as we can on the island. And then about 30% of our projects are with other non-profits like Sustainable Nantucket and other groups that we've worked with on the island. So that said, I guess we'll move on to the first presentation, which this afternoon, is going to be the Light team. So they've been working with Paul and Drew, whom I'm glad to see are here from the DPW, Lauren Sinatra, who's in the back there, and Gail Walker, who's over here from Nantucket Lights. So this is Ethan, Abraham, John, and Ariel. I'll let them introduce themselves and get going with their presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Amaralt.
My name is Ethan Busa.
I'm Ariella Flum.
And I'm Ibrahim Zaka.
And this is our project on achieving compliance with Nantucket's outdoor lighting bylaw. Our goal was to help the town lead by example to bring all town-owned lights into compliance with the bylaw by 2029.
Nearly 2/3 of Americans can no longer see the Milky Way galaxy with their naked eye. Due to its unique geographical location, 30 miles out to sea, and the lack of urbanization on the island, Nantucket is one of the few places left on the eastern seaboard where people can still enjoy the pristine dark sky view and see the Milky Way. Nantucket itself has a long history of dark skies, with the Maria Mitchell Association operating on the island and releasing an annual report of the dark skies above Nantucket every year since their first report released in 1903. The Maria Mitchell Association also operates 2 observatories on the island where residents and visitors alike are able to learn more about the uniquely beautiful skies above Nantucket. So why are we here? On Nantucket, in between 2012 and 2020, there has been a 2.4% annual increase in light pollution on the island. This not only threatens the night sky view, it also wastes energy and has potential impacts on wildlife found on the island. As you can see on this graph in the bottom left, provided by the organization Nantucket Lights, there has been a very steady increase of light pollution on the island over the last decade or so. As you can see on this graphic, showing satellite view of Nantucket from above, there are a few hotspot areas on the island, primarily in the downtown and mid-island areas, mainly above the school complex and the Nantucket Memorial Airport. To mitigate this light pollution, at their most recent town meeting in 2023, the town of Nantucket passed the outdoor lighting bylaw, which went into effect on January 1st of this year and requires full compliance by 2029 for all residential, commercial, and town-owned buildings. This bylaw provides regulations and restrictions on the lumen output, or the brightness for each light, as well as the total lumen output for a property. It also provides restrictions and regulations on the color temperature, requiring that outdoor lights be a warm color temperature. As you can see on this graphic on the bottom right, the lights on the left side of this graphic would be considered compliant because they have the least amount of impact on the dark sky. They also provide regulations on the hours of illumination. This means that lights must be turned off between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. And finally, it provides regulations and restrictions on the amount of shielding that lights must have. So they are fully directed downwards where light is only going where it is wanted or needed.
Our sponsors for our project were Paul Berard and Drew Patnode from the Department of Public Works, Lauren Sinatra from the Energy Office, and Gail Walker with Nantucket Lights. The DPW and Energy Office mission is to bring all town-owned lights into compliance with the bylaw, while Nantucket Lights' mission is to decrease light pollution as much as possible so that Nantucket can be classified as a dark sky community.
Our project's first objective is to take an inventory and assess all the town-owned outdoor lighting fixtures. Our second objective was to research and recommend different ways to make these fixtures compliant. Our third objective was to gauge the public acceptance of a new lensless decorative street light that can be found on Main Street. And our fourth objective was to help make recommendations to the town about how they can reduce light pollution across the island.
To achieve our goal, we had three different methods. Our first being to create an inventory and a map of all town-owned lighting at all the town-owned facilities. As you can see on this map, we went to 60 different locations across the island, primarily in the downtown and mid-island areas, with a few other town locations out in Sconset and Nantucket as well. Our second objective was to conduct stakeholder interviews with key stakeholder groups we found on the island, who provided us with valuable context and background information that was important when we made our recommendations to the town for how they can proceed in the future. Our third and final objective was to conduct a streetlight survey on Main Street, asking the public to decide whether they preferred a lensless streetlight to the existing streetlight on Main Street. Now talking about streetlights on Main Street, there are two main types that you can find around town. The one on the left is known as the colonial style fixture, and it's traditionally a sodium bulb with a glass frame around it, and that's the more rectangular fixture that you can find in places off of Main Street and on the rest of the island. The other type of light, that Victorian style, which is that more round type of fixture that has a glass globe going all the way around. The town has researched dark sky approved alternatives to these two types of lights that have been retrofitted with LEDs and other modifications that make them compliant with the new bylaw. The one on the left is the colonial style without the lens. It has had the glass removed and has also been retrofitted with an LED. And the one on the right is the Victorian style that has also had the glass globe and a lot of the innards and the whale mantle oil holder also removed. For the focus of our project, we were only concerned with the Victorian style fixtures. So we were asking people in our survey to give their opinions on the existing Victorian fixture on the fountain and the fixture that was installed in front of the Ralph Lauren on Main Street. Now talking about our survey, we were outside between in the evenings between November 12th and November 25th, asking people their opinion on these two different lights. The one installed in front of the Ralph Lauren was the lensless fixture that is dark sky compliant, and we were asking them to compare that with the existing fixture on the fountain, which has the glass globe that makes it not compliant. During our time of our survey period, we collected 56 different responses, which is a little bit less than we had hoped, but due to it being the off season, there was limited foot traffic during the time of our responses, so we were only able to get this many responses. During our survey, we asked people first purely based on aesthetics, whether or not which light they preferred between the two, and purely on aesthetics, 73% of people said that they did prefer the fixture that was installed on the fountain, the existing fixture that was already installed there. And then we provided them with more information about why the lensless fixture looked the way that it did and why it had the glass removed. And after learning this information, 66% of people we surveyed said that they would be willing to install these streetlights on Main Street if it meant preserving the dark sky. So they would like to sacrifice aesthetics for preserving Nantucket's natural beauty. There was a lot of community feedback when it came to our different survey questions, with some people saying that the light on the lensless fixture looked better or that it felt warm, while other people scrutinized the lensless fixture, saying that it looked like a vandalized version of the existing fixture. There was a very commonly held opinion that is summed up by one of our key stakeholders, Angus MacLeod of the Nantucket Historical Commission. He said that the glassless lights might be appropriate with more details that match the majority of the existing lights on Main Street and town. The guts of these fixtures are missing. That was a very commonly held opinion that we heard from people, as the guts that he is referring to are the glass and the whale oil mantle holder that would be traditionally found in streetlights on Main Street in Nantucket.
Now we're going to talk about some of the results to come from our inventory on the town-owned lights. We inventoried a total of 868 individual light fixtures at 60 town-owned properties. Of these fixtures, we found 76 to be compliant with the new bylaw, while 233 were non-compliant. Unfortunately, we were not able to determine the compliancy status for 494 of these fixtures. This was usually because we either could not reach the fixture or could not take it apart, so we were not able to determine the exact measurements and specifications of the bulb. One of the major problem areas to arise from our inventory was the Nantucket Public Schools complex. Here we found over 200 individual fixtures, which made up about 25% of all lights on the island. Of these, only about 13 were compliant with the bylaw, and over 50 were found to be non-compliant. This was usually because they had a color that was outside of what was allowed by the bylaw. In our interview with Jeffrey Clayton, the interim director of astronomy at the Murray-Mitchell Association, when we asked him what he thought the major sources of light pollution on the island were, one of his responses was the football field lights when they are turned on. The football field has 4 stadium light poles that each have 17 individual fixtures on them. These fixtures are not well shielded, meaning that light shines up into the sky where it's not wanted, and they are not the proper color temperature. Another problem area was the Nantucket Memorial Airport, which is a known source of light pollution on the island. Unfortunately, we were not able to interview all lights at this location due to FAA regulations requiring specific lights in airports. However, we were able to inventory the lights in the parking lot, where we mainly found there to be 69 colonial-style fixtures that are similar to those that can be found around the island, and they are represented on the map by the red points. The final problem area we found on the island was the Nantucket landfill, which, looking at the map, you would not assume to be a major source of light pollution. However, if you look at this image taken at Hummock Pond of the landfill at night, you'll see that it is a very apparent source of light pollution in what is otherwise a very dark area of the island.
Our first recommendation to the town is to continue the survey on the Victorian-style streetlight because we only got 56 responses due to it being the off-season. We recommend that they use a QR code and online survey to do this so that they can gauge as much public opinion as possible before reassessing when they have all of the data collected. Our second recommendation is to conduct a survey on the glass-free colonial fixture. Many of the lights on the island are colonial, but since we only conducted our survey on Victorian style, we made a colonial style survey for the town to use for this.
And for our third recommendation, we hope that the town will continue to update our inventory and as well as fill in some missing information on some of the outdoor light fixtures. We also hope that the town continues to track the compliancy status of these town-owned light fixtures. And for our fourth recommendation, we hope that the town can prioritize these locations in order to bring them into compliance and reduce the overall light pollution on the island. Firstly, the school complex should work with the town and find some middle ground between safety and mitigation of light pollution. Then, the Nantucket Memorial Airport, the town should do what they can and replace some of the non-compliant parking lot lights, the fixtures. And at the Nantucket landfill, we hope that they can bring that place under compliance as it will drastically reduce the light pollution on the west side of the island, and it would set a good example for the rest of the community.
Our hope is that the town keeps our recommendations in mind when bringing fixtures into making a plan to bring fixtures into compliance, so that they can hopefully bring their lights into compliance by the year 2029. This would set a good example to the rest of the community and spread awareness on the importance of dark skies and the mitigation of light pollution. We would like to thank our sponsors at the Department of Public Works, the Nantucket Energy Office, and Nantucket Lights for all of their guidance, assistance, and insight throughout our project. It would not have been possible without their help. We'd also like to thank all organizations that participated in our interviews, as well as all members of the community who came out to participate in our public survey. Finally, we would like to thank all of you for taking a moment to listen to our presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
And I forgot to say is again that anybody who has questions, if you would come up to the mic, use this one, that would help, because otherwise we can't pick up the question on the audio feed for the online listeners. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So you mentioned that this regulation affects the town. How is this going to affect the homeowners of Nantucket in the future?
The bylaw will require all town-owned buildings as well as commercial buildings and residential properties to bring all of their lights into compliance by 2029.
So when you removing the glass, so removing the lenses from the fixtures, given our weather and everything, I mean, I'm assuming that the guts were protected by the glass being there now, taking that out. Is there any concern about shortening the lifespan of the guts and the lighting, and which then would create a different type of problem given our salt air and all that wonderful stuff?
What has actually been found is that removing the glass actually increases the lifespan because Nantucket has heavy winds, and if you do not have the glass, there's less resistance, so they're less likely to be knocked over or broken by the wind.
And does the moisture impact the electrical on the inside?
All of the lights are actually recessed into the top of the light and protected by a diffuser, so they're not affected by the weather.
Thank you.
Hello. I was wondering if you could tell me about what types of data you collected for each light.
Yeah, for each light, we went around to each location and dropped a pin on our phone so we could get the exact latitude and longitude of that light that we would use when putting it into our map. We also took a note of if we were able to identify it on the bulb. If we were able to reach the bulb and actually see it, we would take note of the lumens, the wattage, whether it was recessed, whether it was fully shielded. and just whether or not it was compliant. And if it wasn't compliant, then we would provide our recommendation to the town based off of that. But just in general, as much information as we could possibly gather from each light. And that's why we had so many missing fixtures, because some of the fixtures that we went to were really high on poles, and we didn't have the equipment to go up there or remove the bulb, or they were fully recessed and we weren't able to remove the diffuser that would allow us to look at the specific bulb. So that's why we hope the DPW is able to use our recommendations and to continue to update the map at these fixtures that we weren't able to reach, and use their equipment and resources better than we were able to for these specific fixtures.
I think it's great that you looked at different styles of those lights for sure. But I'm wondering if there's any cost associated with upkeep or maintenance or the initial purchase that would potentially make it more beneficial to switch to those LEDs or the glassless versions.
Yeah, definitely with LEDs, they have a much longer lifespan than these sodium bulbs, so that alone would decrease the energy costs. And as we said, with them being better for maintenance, with them not being knocked over or anything like that because of the less wind resistance, that would also increase their lifespan and be better on the cost to upkeep the fixtures.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the new compliant Victorian style is functionally the same as the old one, with the light moved to the upper section and then the internals removed. What prevents a Victorian style of that with the light in the top, but still with the glass around it, which seemed to be a primary thing that individuals indicate that they liked? What prevents the glass from being included in the new design?
So part of the bylaw, when you're looking at new light fixtures, there's a rating for each light called a bug rating. And so it's an acronym for backlighting, uplighting, and glare. And by adding the glass fixture, it makes the bug rating for that Victorian style fixture, it makes it out of compliance. By adding the glass to the fixture, it creates glare and uplighting that would not exist when the glass is removed.
Thank you kindly.
I was going to say, Gail, Drew, Lauren, do you have any questions?
You know I always have questions. So for the record, I'm Gail Walker. I'm the founder and president of Nantucket Lights. You guys know it, but those listening might not. So I just wanted to ask, in response to Angus's quote that you included about the missing guts. So my understanding from the representative for the manufacturer of that glass-free fixture is that the design elements could be customized, could be changed. It doesn't have to be exactly what is on Main Street now. And I was just wondering, for purposes of continuing the survey, given, I don't know how many comments you received like that, would you recommend that we try to get a fixture that actually has some of that internal design? I think that's called a finial, or I'm not sure the right terminology, but as a design to make it not look so empty, if that was the concern of the historical folks. Because my understanding is that might be able to be changed. It's just that the glass couldn't be added because it's the glass that causes the uplighting, which would violate the bylaw and would render Nantucket possibly ineligible for the dark sky community certification. So just wondering, because I don't know how many responses you got like that, would you recommend looking into a different fixture for continuing the survey?
Yeah, so we, based on how many people responded saying they missed the mantle or the whale oil holder, and especially talking to historical groups, they said that that is one of the more important aspects historically, more so than the glass. So moving forward, it would be a good idea to get a new pilot fixture that does not have the glass, but it does have the innards.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you so much for everything you did. This is an incredible step forward for Nantucket for reducing light pollution. And I know you guys put in so much time. I really appreciate it. And I want to say, I really commend you for coming up to speed on all these complicated issues so quickly. I've been looking at it for about 6 years now, and you guys came up to speed so quickly. So thank you so much for everything you did.
Hey, guys. Excuse me. Drew Patno, Director of Public Works, one of the sponsors of this project. I want to say thanks to Dominic and to you guys. It was a real pleasure working with you. We're very excited. We love our Google Maps of different assets of ours at the DPW that we maintain. So it's going to be a really, really good tool going forward. Thank you guys for choosing Nantucket over London, sticking it out from 5 to 7 p.m. in the freezing cold. It was like 60 degrees every day until you guys decided to start the survey. So thanks so much for your time, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I promise, this is the end. Would you recommend another WPI IQP team to extend your project, and if so, how?
Our hope is that the town is able to conduct the necessary surveys on the new streetlights, but of course, if it would be simpler, if it would be easier for more WPI students to come and conduct those surveys, that would also probably be great.
Okay, next fall. Well, thank you, team. Appreciate it. Nice job. And thank you again to Drew. And thank you to their sponsors, Drew Patno, Paul, they're in, Lauren Sinatra in the back there, and Gail Walker. So really appreciate all that you did for the team, helping them get this project completed. So next up, as I recall, are the tree team, who worked also with Drew Patnode, but also Charlie Palacci, who I think is in the back there. So we've got Alex, PJ, Jason, and Brendan, who are going to tell you about their project, developing a tree inventory, or an inventory of town trees for Nantucket. Thank you.
Is that good? Okay. Good afternoon. Our team worked in collaboration with the Nantucket Department of Public Works to design a Nantucket town tree inventory and maps. I'm Alex Santagata.
I'm PJ McDonald.
I'm Jason G. And I'm Brendan Galvin. So, town trees have played a fairly significant role throughout Nantucket's history. After the Great Fire of 1846, a lot of the downtown area, along with the trees that were lining the streets, was left completely barren. From the ashes, however, new life did manage to sprout as islanders began to rebuild. One of these people was Henry Coffin, who reintroduced elms to the island. Many of the trees lining the streets today actually date back to the mid-1800s, some of which are the original elms that were planted by Henry Coffin in 1851. As shown on the images on the right, the trees planted back then are still thriving to this day, and having a plethora of a bunch of rare species, Nantucket is actually one of the only places in the world where people can still see and enjoy the original American elms.
Back one more. Okay. So because Nantucket's trees are so historically significant and valuable to both residents and visitors, the town has implemented a bylaw designating and protecting town trees in Chapter 132 of the Nantucket Code. A tree is considered town-owned if any of several conditions are met, including purchase or maintenance by the town, position on town property, or the presence of a medallion, such as the Tree Committee medallion shown below. Due to several town-sponsored planting events, such as the Town Tree Giveaway in the mid-1980s, there are actually several town trees in Nantucket that are stationed on private property. However, there has been a historical lack of clarity from the town regarding these trees' protected status. This has led to property owners of the town. These trees on the right were both involved in disputes that took place in 2022. In both cases, the tree stationed on private property, and in both cases it was ruled a town tree. However, the property owner had been given no prior notice that the tree was town-owned. These disputes cost valuable time and energy from both the property owners and the town, especially the authorities on these valuable town-owned assets.
As previously mentioned, the sponsor for our project was the Nantucket Department of Public Works, or DPW, which maintains all the public facilities on Nantucket. The DPW works in coordination with the Tree Advisory Committee to both protect and preserve the town trees of Nantucket, as they are a crucial aspect of both the history and beauty of Nantucket for its visitors and residents. Recently, the DPW has been wanting to minimize the amount of disputes over tree ownership, as well as inform builders and contractors about the location of town trees to prevent any future conflicts. In order to do this, they have wanted to make an easily accessible map of all the town trees that could be available to the public, which was the origin for our project.
The primary goal of our project was to develop a database and easily accessible online maps of Nantucket's town trees to aid the DPW, town officials, developers, property owners, and other members of the public in the identification and management of town trees. To complete this main goal, we created 4 objectives. The first objective is to review the first objective was to identify current tree practices and the best ones. The second objective was to review past inventories and collect stakeholder opinions about inventories. The third objective was to develop a system to collect and manage tree data, and the fourth and final objective is to develop online maps of these trees.
So as mentioned, our first objective was to identify the current and best practices for inventorying trees. To do this, we spoke with several other New England towns about their tree inventories, including Arlington, Providence, Natick, and Boston. A screenshot of Boston's tree inventory is shown on the right, where each green dot on the map represents one tree. So we asked these experts over a remote interview, or via a remote interview, about their data collection procedures, some of the uses for their inventory, and whether they conducted the inventory in-house, hired volunteers, or contracted a tree management company like Davey Tree. Their responses informed some of our own data collection efforts, as well as some of our recommendations for the future for the DPW.
Our second objective was to review previous inventories on Nantucket and conduct stakeholder interviews about the opinions on inventories. So when we first arrived on island, we learned from the DPW that there had been prior inventories done in 1986, 2017, and 2019. The 1986 inventory introduced a tree ID system, which is still in use today. However, since it is so old, it is not very relevant for today. The 2017 and 2019 inventories were much more recent. However, they were incomplete inventories and didn't collect all the data on trees, and they also did not have a publicly accessible map along with them. There was also a 2018 inventory done as another IQP project in coordination with the Nantucket Land and Water Council. However, this inventory was only on Main Street and did not make distinctions between town trees and privately owned trees. Across all 4 of these inventories, a couple of data fields were quite similar, such as the ID number of a tree, an approximate location, species, condition, and diameter of breast height. We also conducted interviews with people involved in town management, town tree maintenance, different conservation groups, and different residential groups. Our interviews with these people were focused on how a town tree inventory could be of use to each of their organizations, as well as what type of data fields they would like us to include that could be of use to them. Using what we learned from the DPW in our inventories, Jason will now talk about how we designed our data collection protocol.
Our third objective was to develop a system to collect and manage data. So when we first met with the DPW, we received a paper copy of all the data that they had on the town trees. This contained information regarding the tag tree number, the species, the approximate address, the diameter at breast height, and the condition of each tree. We began by digitizing this data onto a Google Sheets document, which served as our primary database and was referenced heavily throughout the project, a portion of which can be seen in the image on the left. Using this database, we located each town tree by following the approximate address and then looking for trees demarcated with town tree tags. An example of a town tree and its associated tag are both shown in the images on the right. Whenever we found a town tree, we verified the data in the spreadsheet, recorded the longitude and latitude, and then took a photograph for use in our Google map. In order to collect the coordinates, we began by placing our phone close to the tree and then using Google Maps to record the phone's location and adjusting off of the satellite image as needed. We found that this system was accurate up to 5 decimal places, which translates to roughly 1 meter of error. After we tested this system along the trees lining Main Street, we then implemented it island-wide and uploaded the data to our Google map, as will be described by Brendan in the next slide.
Our fourth and final objective focuses on actually developing these maps. So as stated before, the Google Sheets act as the backbone for the tree inventory database. We developed 2 different maps, one of which being a Google Maps and one of which being a layer on the town's GIS. Starting off with the Google Maps, you guys can see a picture of it here with the spread of various trees, there's some in downtown, some in Sconset, and you can see a pop-out on the left with an image of the tree, as well as some of the attributes of the tree. All the various colors represent various species, showing the diversity of trees throughout the island. This Google Maps will be published on the town's website. Moving on to the next thing, which is the town's GIS layer. GIS stands for Geographic Informational System, and the GIS layer on the town's website is only gonna include the coordinates of each tree as to connotate to town officials, whether there's a town tree on a property or not, and other developers. This inventory, however, is not 100% complete, and there are still some gaps which are going to be filled as the town works on trees.
So this slide shows a zoomed in image of our Google map, with each marker indicating an individual town tree. As noted by Brendan, there was a large amount of town trees located in the downtown area of Nantucket, and specifically there was a large amount on Main Street, which you can see as the long line of markers at the bottom of the screen. In addition, we also took a photo of Main Street, which you can see in the top left, which highlights many of the large elms that are prominent along Main Street. In addition to the downtown of Nantucket, the other major area with town trees was in Sconset. In particular, in Sconset, most of its town trees were located along its Main Street, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. We also took a picture of the Main Street of Sconset, which highlights many of the sycamore maples, which are commonly found along that road.
In reviewing the data, we found that the most prominent types of trees were elm trees, maples, and locust trees. These total to around 591 trees out of the 1,124 total inventory trees, which amounts to roughly 53% of the entire inventory. Of these, elms total to 321 trees, which makes up an entire 30% of the inventory. Maples total to around 149, and locusts to 121.
So from our interviews with both on-island stakeholders and off-island experts, we identified 3 central use cases for this inventory. First, it will improve clarity on town tree ownership for homeowners, developers, the town, and any other interested parties. This will effectively eliminate the need for tree disputes, as anyone can now easily gauge a tree's ownership status. Second, it will revolutionize tree management on the island. The inventory can be used to ensure trees are routinely maintained, and even to develop a succession plan for trees that have died. Finally, the inventory can be used in the development of outreach materials and education, such as programs teaching children about the significance of Nantucket's native trees, or tree tours like those hosted by the Land and Water Council. In short, this inventory will be of great utility to the town of Nantucket.
Thank you to Drew Patno, the Director of the Department of Public Works. Thanks to Charlie Palaki, the Director of Nantucket Parks and Recreation, as well as other DPW members who assisted us. Thank you to Dale Gary, Town Arborist, and Dave Shampoo, the Town Tree Warden, for protecting and caring for the trees in Nantucket. Thank you to all the other interviewees and experts and conservationists on Nantucket that we interviewed. Thank you guys for listening to our presentation.
So if anybody would like questions.
We'll now be bringing up a live demo of our Google map as well. Should just be...
If the technology cooperates.
So
so I've got a question for you.
Yes?
So, you mentioned that there are a number of trees on the island that were previously under dispute as to their ownership.
Yes.
Presumably, these trees did not have town shade tree tags on them.
I believe in most cases they did not, no.
How did your team go about assessing which trees were the property of the town if they did not have town tree tags? And are you confident that all of those are in fact town trees?
So to clarify, I apologize. As of our inventory, all inventoried trees have already been tagged by the DPW. As of the time of the disputes, they had not been tagged, so ownership was ambiguous at that time. But as of right now, all inventoried trees are tagged, save for some in Winter Park that have been ripped off by children.
Do you know how that assessment was done?
We were not closely involved with that process, that assessment. We were mostly following in the footsteps of the DPW as they recorded other information about town trees, such as DBH and condition. So we were less identifying previously uninventoried trees and more adding to an existing set of data.
Thank you, Alex.
No problem.
Any other questions, please?
So you guys reviewed a lot of different trees. I know it took a lot of time. Out of all of the trees that you guys took pictures of, do you have like one that stands out or like a favorite?
I don't know if we'd be able to pull it up on the map. I don't know how quickly that could be navigated, but I would say certainly I believe it's colloquially called the broccoli tree in front of the high school is a very notable one. It's a very large elm. I'm not sure. That's a good one.
Thank you.
Show us what it does.
Just a quick overview of the map. So this is what it looks like, the Google Maps at least, when you pull it up. You can see there are all the different colors representing the different species of the trees. I like to look at downtown just because there's so many trees surrounding here. Whenever you click on, you can click on any pointer, and then it'll pop up with all the different attributes of the tree, such as the tag number, the type of tree, address, condition, tree species, and DBH. And you can also click on a picture of the tree if you want to see exactly what the tree looks like and its surroundings.
In the past, you have mentioned that some of these trees have caused damage to the sidewalks and other property of the town, which I at least have taken some pictures of, and it's quite extensive at certain points. Have you notated this in any way for the DPW to perhaps be remediated at the future point? And do you have any thoughts on that trade-off between accessibility and the trees?
We certainly would love to see the island take more strides towards a more accessible, more accessible landscapes and infrastructural decisions. We at this time do not have any way to record any encumbrances or other damage caused by the tree, but one of our central recommendations for the DPW's own internal use is to record some of the tree's surroundings, including problematic surrounding infrastructure, not only limited to sidewalks, but also disrupted power lines or sewer lines.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, guys. I'm Brooke Moore, and I'm chair of the select board, and I just want to say this is going to be a tremendous tool that's going to prevent my board from having to deal with appeals about who owns a town tree. And to me, the value you have created for the community is enormous just in that regard. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey guys, this time I do have two questions. First is, going forward, we've discussed how valuable of a tool this will be for our department, but could you highlight a little bit about how the spreadsheet works and how we can maybe add columns to populate additional data, like whether it's impacting infrastructure, et cetera?
Sure. So our group, in addition to the maps themselves, has actually prepared a manual, which will be delivered to you shortly, regarding some of the ways that the DPW can internally work with this database for the future. One of the central things that we outline is how to add additional columns so that new data fields can be added. In our interviews with many stakeholders, we've outlined many of the desired data fields from stakeholders, which include the year a tree was planted, some of its associated history, encumbrances and surroundings, as mentioned, and maintenance history. So all of those data fields and more can be added as desired and populated as tree maintenance and other work is done.
And this data as a KMZ file, we can export this and put it into an asset management database when we have one in the future, correct?
Yes, it can all be exported directly from Google Maps to a shapefile. This is also how we're transferring it to the town GIS layer, and it can be imported into any other software that uses a KMZ as well. Excellent.
Last question. Did you guys track how many miles you guys put on your bikes for this project? Because I'm sure it was extensive. And with that being said, I appreciate you guys very much putting this project together. I know we got a lot of really positive comments and compliments, and there's a lot of excitement around us as a community having this tool. And so thanks again for all your time. Really appreciate it.
We appreciate your sponsorship. Thank you.
Okay, I guess if there's no more questions. So thanks to the tree team. Our next topic is one that I'm sure is close to the heart of lots of people on the island. Everyone knows that coastal erosion and flooding is a problem, going to become a bigger problem with climate change in the future. And so we've had previous projects on coastal erosion, as many of you may know. This fall we had a team working with Leah Hill, over there in the audience, and Vince Murphy, the NRD, looking at, I was going to say, they're not looking at community, no, got the wrong title up. Looking at outreach methods, best practices and the like, to reach out to the community about coastal erosion and flooding. So I'll hand it over to Jackson, Carter, and Rin. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We are the Coastal Resiliency Outreach Team. My name is Carter Alday.
And I'm Rin McTigg.
The goal of our project, in collaboration with the Nantucket Natural Resources Department, is to aid them in bringing strategic, evidence-based suggestions, recommendations, and sample materials to help them in their goal of bringing outreach to homeowners in regards to coastal resiliency. It's no secret that Nantucket faces coastal hazards differently than other coastal communities. In response to this, the Nantucket Natural Resources Department, in collaboration with the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, created the Nantucket Coastal Resilience Plan. This plan outlines what hazards Nantucket faces and what strategies can be implemented by both the town and homeowners alike. But why are we here? Why are we doing this? Over the last 70 years, Nantucket has seen sea level rise at 20% greater than the global average. By 2040, Nantucket is predicted to have sea level rise of up to 13 inches. Erosion rates on Nantucket, specifically around the South Shore, have seen in the last 10 years over 100 feet of shoreline recession. And the CRP estimates that by 2050, $3.4 billion in damages are going to be caused by coastal hazards, most of which are going to affect homeowners. And in future projections, if the map wants to show up in future projections, it's predicted that by 2100, there will be a 4 times increase in flood-affected structures and an 8 times increase in erosion-affected structures.
The NNRD's Division of Coastal Hazards and Resiliency is tasked with identifying coastal hazards such as flooding and erosion and generating plans to mitigate these as these threats present. The goal of our project is to produce educational materials based in evidence, outreach recommendations, and prototype materials to assist the NNRD in their efforts to increase the resiliency of homeowners.
Our project has three main objectives. First, to understand the concerns, opinions, and experiences of homeowners regarding coastal resiliency. Second, to evaluate current educational best practices in coastal resilience outreach as supported by both academic research and by practices being used by other resiliency-focused organizations. Third, to generate evidence-based recommendations for the Natural Resources Department in order for them to improve their outreach. We had three main means for accomplishing this objective. First, we conducted an in-depth analysis of data collected from the Nantucket Homeowners Survey, a survey created and run by the Natural Resources Department prior to our arrival here. We used this data in order to better understand the island-wide sentiment from homeowners. We also conducted community-level interviews, specifically in the Nantucket, Smiths Point, and Fisher's Landing areas, in order to understand the perspectives of homeowners in these high-risk communities. We chose these communities after discussion with our sponsors due to their high risk from both flooding and erosion. We also conducted interviews with experts in the field of outreach, especially in coastal resiliency, both on Nantucket and off island, in order to better understand the practices currently being used.
After taking into account both the homeowner interviews and the survey that was conducted island-wide, one of the most important findings that the team decided was that more informational materials are required for homeowners. Okay. From the survey, we learned that when homeowners were asked, how can the town assist you? The three most common options were more informational presentations, a best practices brochure for your property, and a best practices brochure for your lawn. Additionally, when homeowners were asked about the coastal resilience plan and if they had any opinions on it, we were given comments that they felt that there wasn't enough updates on the coastal resilience plan and how it's being implemented in their communities. Additionally, something that was brought to us by homeowners was that the permitting process is unclear and complex. In some cases, homeowners had the means to implement strategies, but instead opted not to, thinking that they were legally restricted from doing so.
When undertaking an outreach campaign, it is important to not only provide information in a comprehensive fashion, but to also provide a variety of different ways to interact with that information, increasing the likelihood that a given person finds that information and finds it in a way that resonates with them. Examples of this are physical materials such as brochures and newsletters, in-person events that assist in fostering personal connections between the public and these organizations, as well as experiential activities to provide homeowners with hands-on experience from these effects on their properties. These multi-method approaches are shown to increase engagement and enjoyment of learning about these activities, which evidence shows increases long-term retention of this information, as well as fosters positive behaviors linked to adopting adaptation and mitigation strategies.
Framing is a communications technique in which particular elements of a message are highlighted in order to direct the audience towards a certain perspective. A framing device that was supported by both our background research and our expert interviewees was the technique of framing the discussions of coastal hazards around the actions which can be taken to prevent the damages they cause, rather than the risk they present. That's a bit confusing, so allow me to explain in more detail. When all you hear about is how much risk your home is being put at, that in 50 years, your home will be washed away, you'll begin to think that damage, you'll begin to resign yourself, that there's no reason to delay the inevitable after all. However, that damage is not inevitable. There are actions that you can take to protect your home. So rather than saying your home is at an extremely high flood risk, by 2070, according to this map, your house will be washed away and gone, and ending the discussion there, it is far more effective to continue that discussion and tie it into the actions that be taken to cause that to not happen. Your home is a very high risk. According to this map, you are going to be in a very high priority risk zone from flooding. In your situation, it is very helpful to either raise your home or implement wet floodproofing or removing hardscaping. Here's the process to implement these strategies and protect your home. Now the discussion has been reframed away from the risk that is caused into the actions that you can take to protect yourself. it will come as no surprise that in-person events were both the most successful form of outreach according to our organizations, or according to our experts and our background research. They were also the most requested form of communication from our homeowners in both the survey and our interviews. Because of this, this is our first recommendation that we are making to the Natural Resources Department to increase the number of in-person events they put on. There are a multitude of benefits from in-person events that particularly gel well with the Natural Resource Department's needs. The first and most obvious is they put a face to the name. If you've ever read some of the NRD's materials or browsed their social media page, you'll have likely heard the name Leah Hill. But unless you had been to one of our in-person events or looked to the right of the room, all you would have seen is a face on a screen. As we heard from our experts, it is very important to create a deeper personal connection to the information and the presenter than this. By coming to an in-person presentation, the audience has a greater chance for interaction with both, again, the information and presenter. Even just the option to ask questions after an interview increases the audience's involvement in the communications process, going from a one-way process to a two-way process, where the presenter and audience can interact and discuss. Another benefit of in-person events is their ability to better showcase the reality of resiliency, being able to do an on-site tour, for example. It's a very different experience walking along the coastal bluff on Nantucket Beach and seeing all of the defunct wiring and piping hanging out the side of it than it is just seeing a picture on a slideshow, trust me. Another very valuable tool is organizational partnerships. The NRD is not alone in their goal of protecting the island from coastal hazards. There are many other organizations on this island with very deep roots who care about this issue, especially the multitude of conservation organizations on island. We recommend that the NRD partners with these organizations in order to better increase their outreach capabilities. For example, an outreach event which was conducted just this August between the NRD and Nantucket Conservation Foundation was a marsh walk along Folgers Marsh with Leah and Dr. Jennifer Carberg guiding the tour. This tour benefited from this partnership because without the Conservation Foundation's involvement, the Natural Resources Department may not have had access to be able to conduct this tour on this marsh and create a personal connection between the audience of learning about this resiliency information on how marshes help resilience, and also being there and experiencing it and seeing it firsthand. The ecological knowledge of the audience also improved by having Dr. Carberg co-guide the tour, who's an expert in how salt marshes connect with the ecology of Nantucket. Another benefit is the ability to pool resources. It's similar like I said, if the Natural Resources Department had only conducted this event alone, they would not have had the benefit of the resources of the Conservation Foundation to tour this marsh. And if the Conservation Foundation had only conducted it alone, they would not have had the expertise of Leah Hill on how these marshes connect to coastal resiliency.
After taking into account everything we've learned, from background research to homeowner interviews to the survey to our expert interviews, we decided that brochures would be a great option to display to homeowners what options they have when adapting to coastal hazards. I'll walk you through the brochure a little because it's a lot to look at. So when you open up the brochure, it opens up to a section of risk. It allows homeowners an opportunity to scan the QR code into a FEMA projection site where they can input their address to learn if their property is going to be in a projected coastal erosion zone. Then, opening up the brochure more, you'll see 3 detailed strategies that homeowners can implement on their property, outlining their pros and cons. Then, going to the back panel of the survey, we have a hiring an engineer guide. We understand that most projects completed on your home are going to require an engineer. So we decided it was appropriate for homeowners to ask questions to themselves, like, is my property in a historical district zone? Or is my property within 100 feet of a protected wetland? This is to ensure that they hire an engineer that's familiar with these issues. Then, moving on, we decided to implement a permitting process flowchart so that homeowners themselves can get a little bit better understanding of what's going on in the permitting process, which Rin will explain now.
When we interviewed homeowners, a great number of them indicated to us that they felt confused by the permitting process that regulates the mitigation strategies that they wished to undertake. They felt it was opaque and hard to interact with. As a result, we created a step-by-step flowchart indicating each of the permits that you need to take, they're each color-coded, and how you need to go through them and if they affect you. We hope that this, being hosted on the NNRD's website, will increase the understanding of homeowners when they are looking into undertaking a mitigation strategy project.
Another recommendation that we would like to make is for the Natural Resources Department to increase their presence on social media. To be clear, that this is not an issue of a lack of quantity of social media posts, but rather of the lack of quality of them. Again, to be clear, creating these high-quality social media posts consistently to a very high level is incredibly time-consuming, as our experts attested. And so it is completely understandable that the Natural Resources Department conducts their social media presence in a far less time-consuming manner due to their capacity. But that doesn't mean that we can't present the options. Social media is an incredibly valuable tool for highlighting the events and work that an organization conducts outside of just outreach. Social media is most effective when used creating posts with photos, long-form video or short-form videos, showcasing exciting, impressive, or informative moments from fieldwork or events that have been conducted. Because of this ability to strongly highlight other things, social media is very important to a multimodal approach, functioning as a connective tissue between the different forms of outreach. We also recommend that the Natural Resources Department implements a biannual or annual print newsletter. The reason for this is that newsletters are very different from social media, functioning as more standalone, in-depth sources of information. As we found from interviewing our multiple experts, there are already a number of annual and biannual newsletters that are used to give, especially important here, project updates on the work that they conduct. One of the things that we heard from homeowners was a lack of clarity on the progress of the Natural Resource Department's different projects, especially those relating to the Coastal Resiliency Plan. While that information does exist, it can be very difficult for a casual observer to access it at the current moment. We believe that a newsletter that goes in depth onto these projects would be a very effective way of informing the wider public of their progress. Print newsletters are also particularly valuable due to an effect that was ascribed to us by one of our expert interviewees as the coffee table effect. Due to their physical, continuous nature, newsletters can continue to be picked up later and involve a greater audience than initial. Let me give an example. Let's say you get a really nice looking, very hefty, well-formatted newsletter in the mail. You go ahead, you take it, you read it a little bit, maybe don't finish it, and set it down on your coffee table. I'd probably do the same, to be honest. But maybe you'll have guests over later in the day or next week. They'll come to your home and they'll see this really beautiful looking newsletter on your coffee table, and maybe they'll be interested. They'll pick it up, they'll read through a little bit, and now the audience of that information has expanded, informing an even greater number of people.
Insofar, we have made a number of recommendations to bolster the NNRD's outreach efforts. These are but a portion of our recommendations that we made in our paper. Unfortunately, none of these recommendations fall within the current scope of the employees of the NNRD, so adopting them would significantly strain the NNRD, likely beyond its current limits. As a result, the team recommends that the NNRD be given a full-time communications coordinator, separate from any other town department, to help create this media and push it to the community. We recommend that they would be creating in-person events to interact with the public and help spread the message of the NNRD in a more personal way, increase social media presence so that there is somebody spending the time and energy to make these high quality posts, distribute a newsletter to the general public as to the projects that the NNRD is undertaking, and also to lead experiential events where they can create material for the public to get a hands-on approach with the work that the NNRD is doing and the threats that affect their home.
So what will our recommendations do? We hope that our recommendations will assist the Natural Resources Department now and in the future in their goal of bringing effective coastal resiliency outreach to homeowners. Now we'd like to give a special thank you to Leah Hill, who's sitting over here on the right side of the room, and Vincent Murphy from the Natural Resources Department. They've been wonderful sponsors to us. Without them, none of this could have happened. And we'd also like to thank all experts and homeowners who took the time out of their day to be interviewed by us. Thank you all very much.
And those who are present today.
Yeah, and thank you all for coming today.
We'll take questions now.
Yes, we will.
Does anybody have a question? If they come to the microphone, please.
First, thank you. Thank you very much. So, we talk about homeowners, and that's adults, and people like me will be long dead before, by the time the island washes away. For the youth, schools and stuff, any recommendations in terms of working with youth and working with schools so that they're the ones who actually are going to have to do the work and live with the consequences or lack of, or the progress, whatever we do. So any suggestions there as to how to work with schools and to have youth more involved in the coastal resilience, not just for us, but really nationwide?
So to speak to that, it's a bit of a weird topic. It's strange to think about. We have to tell all our kids that all of this island is going away. Rah. That's a weird thing to say, but it's not actually a terrible idea. We didn't, there was less of it. So there's an interesting dichotomy that went on with our interviews and academic research. In the organizations that focus on resiliency, it is primarily focused towards an adult audience. But what we found to be really effective, and in a similar vein from the conservation organizations that we interviewed, was that by informing the youth, it greatly benefits once they grow up. They'll already be very knowledgeable about the subject and be way ahead of where, I don't know, even I will be as a 20-year-old learning about this now in 40 years. And so while it is very valuable, and we do make a small mention of it in our recommendations in the paper, there wasn't as much basis among resiliency-based groups, and so it didn't become a super big component.
We'd also like to note that, yes, the future generations will inherit the problems we leave behind for them. It is also the responsibility of those who currently own homes, who have businesses on the island, and are engaged in organizations like the CRAC to do what they can while they are still here. They have the properties, they have the money. Younger generations will not take hold of these assets for many decades to come. As Carter noted, by 2030, which hopefully many of you will still be alive for, there will be significant advances in the damages to this island, even while you're still here. Many of these houses, especially in Nantucket, have been here for generations, and passing that responsibility off to the next generation, even though you're advancing in age, is irresponsible. There is work that can be done now that will give them a fighting chance, whereas if you simply wait for the future, they have none.
Additionally, I'd like to note that this is where our outreach coordinator would come into play. There's a lot of social media presence that could be improved through the Natural Resources Department, and this is one of the best ways to interact with the youth. That everyone's always on Instagram, whatever, Facebook for some other generations. I mean, getting this information out to the youth, that's one of the best ways to do it, and they're going to need someone to take care of that for them.
Do we have other questions from the audience, please? Leah, would you like to say anything?
Hi, everyone. Leah Hill. I want to thank you all for your hard work. I think that, you could have stayed months, many more months to get a lot more work done, but I loved working with you all and appreciate the brochures that you made so that the town can use that as a guide to be able to brand it and then put it out to the homeowners for Nantucket. This was kind of a pilot project, and we hope that what has come out of it we can put to other villages like, Surfside and Wisconsin, Tom Nevers, and all of that.
Leah, I have a question for you.
Oh, gosh. What?
Would you say, based on the progress that we made in Nantucket, that you would want another IQP team to come back and continue this in another community?
Yes, we can talk about that when Dominic comes back in May, but I think it could help for replicating it for other areas around the island.
Thank you, Leah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so our fourth team worked with Rosie Constable and Ella Potenza at Sustainable Nantucket, looking at a new tool to assess food and agricultural systems on Nantucket. So if that team wants to come forward, Anna Rose, Pujit, Nick, and Zoe will tell you all about their project. And before Paul leaves, I'm sorry, Paul, I mangled your name earlier. Last name's Berard. Sorry about that.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to our presentation on the Community and Agriculture Resilience Audit Tool for Nantucket, abbreviated as CARET. My name is Nick Golpavar.
I'm Anna Rose Avery. I'm Zoe Fisk.
And I'm Pujit Kapoor.
This presentation will contain our project background details, along with our methodology and findings. And lastly, we'll wrap up with our project recommendations. So many of you may be familiar with the emptied store shelves of Stop and Shop, and this is not an uncommon occurrence on Nantucket. These images were actually just taken a few weeks ago in mid-November in light of the recent cyber attacks affecting Stop and Shop's supply chain. This idea really highlights the fragility of Nantucket's food system, as Nantucket already lies at the end of a lot of supply chains. These concerns extend beyond just cyber attacks, however, as natural hazards such as strong storms and harbor freezings can bring Nantucket's food system shipments to a halt. The alternative to this is to turn towards Nantucket's own local food system. As such, we've been partnering with Sustainable Nantucket, our project sponsor, who's been tasked with leading the CARET assessment effort in Nantucket County. Additionally, we've been working with the Marion Institute, who has been piloting CARET in 5 more counties alongside the southeastern coast of Massachusetts. This includes Dukes, Barnstable, Plymouth, Norfolk, and Essex counties. This is part of a larger community audit in this region to assess community food system resilience using the CARET tool. So you might be wondering at this point, what is CARET? CARET is a new food system assessment tool divided into 101 indicators, questions organized into 7 core themes. And these 7 core themes are community health and well-being, community self-reliance in food, distributive and democratic leadership, focus on local farmers, food processors, and food distributors, food sovereignty, place-based economics, as well as natural resource management, which is up at the top there. So the indicators with indicator questions within these themes are scored from 0 to 3 based on the level of implementation of a specific policy, practice, or program. And this is different from how a traditional food system assessment tool works. Normally, these traditional tools focus on metrics such as farmland acreage, population statistics, and other economic output metrics. And this is usually taken from the USDA Census of Agriculture. Taking a look at some actual CARET indicators, we can see how CARET is different in this regard. CARET has a qualitative focus on the policies, practices, and programs that impact a community. These include things such as protecting farmland from non-farm development, as well as supporting the adoption and preservation of windbreaks. This focus on the qualitative aspect of a food system is especially important for Massachusetts because the state has seen a rise in the popularity of local food system movements. This includes things like farmers markets and community-supported agriculture that provide a new outlook on Nantucket's own local food system. This wouldn't otherwise be measured with a traditional food system assessment tool, but it will be with CARET.
And moving on to the goal for our project, our team has set out to assist our sponsor, Sustainable Nantucket, in preparing to implement the CARET assessment for Nantucket County. To accomplish this goal, we organized our objectives into 4 sections. First, we assess CARET protocols by reviewing all 101 indicator questions, as well as getting in contact with the CARET developers directly. After this, we assess stakeholder contributions by conducting 21 on-island interviews across 16 various organizations. Then we identified current and best practices when implementing the CARET assessment being used by other pilot communities. And finally, we provided recommendations to both our sponsor, Sustainable Nantucket, and the North American Food Systems Network, the developers of CARET. For our interviews, we conducted 5 on-island farm interviews, 16 island organization interviews, and 2 interviews with other communities piloting the CARET assessment. One key finding from our 5 interviews was the hesitance towards local food policy. Many farmers expressed to us concerns about additional policies impacting daily operations. In general, we found a sense of mistrust geared towards policies that are perceived to be disconnected from the realities of small-scale farming. Farmers want policies that are practical, flexible, and supportive of their efforts to remain viable. As with small-scale farming comes tight profit margins and often incentivizes farmers to import value-added goods such as dairy products and fine wines as they yield higher profit margins.
From our interviews with 16 organizations on island, we've discovered that there is a lack of cohesion and collaboration between these organizations with some of their programs, and this creates a lot of duplicative efforts on island. So, for example, there are a multitude of food programs on Nantucket, like Nourishing Nantucket, Grow Boxes, and Meals on Wheels, which are all working to achieve a similar goal in tackling Nantucket's food insecurity issue. While having multiple programs like these in and of itself isn't a bad thing due to greater outreach, these duplicative efforts are made problematic by the logistical burdens that arise with operating such programs. These burdens create inefficiencies within the organizations, which could potentially be ameliorated by combining these smaller separate efforts into larger efforts. From speaking with 2 other communities which are also piloting the carrot, we've picked up on 3 major points. The first of these points is that these communities generally adhered to a 2-convention approach for implementing the carrot. Initially, a core group of participants to fill out the indicators were identified, and this group typically consisted of members of a local food policy council. The core group held a preliminary convention where they went through scoring and discussing as many of carrot's indicators as they can, and noting the ones they could not. They then collected data on these missing indicators by going out and speaking with relevant community stakeholders. Finally, they reconvened and filled in any gaps left from the first meeting to complete the scoring process. The second thing we picked up on was that communities may need to make modifications to carrot's indicators to better reflect their own needs. So, for example, this may include things like modifying the wording of the indicators or dropping indicators that aren't necessarily applicable. The third thing we picked up on was that one of the most significant outcomes of carrot, aside from the final resilience scores that it outputs, is its ability to generate discussion amongst community members. This is crucial because recognizing a problem is the first and arguably one of the most important steps in solving it. Finally, we held a focus group with 4 food system actors on Nantucket to score the 5th theme of carrot, which is focus on local farmers, food processors, and food distributors. From the group, we learned that the structure of carrot's indicators, specifically the ordering and the ambiguity in the wording, tended to create misunderstanding and confusion amongst participants while trying to assign scores to the indicators. Additionally, carrot's scoring system seems to prioritize the existence of policies, programs, and practices over their impact or usage within a community. Carrot's indicators typically ask a community if they have policies, programs, or practices that do X, Y, and Z, rather than if these policies are actually effective in serving their purpose. Also, carrot's scoring system lacked readily accessible standardized examples for each of the scores, which would sort of demonstrate to each of the users, in this case focus group participants, what the 4 different levels of policy implementation might look like in the real world in various types of communities.
Based on our findings, we have a list of our recommendations to both Sustainable Nantucket as well as the North American Food Systems Network. Our first recommendation is to Sustainable Nantucket. We recommend that they form a core group of stakeholders, which is listed in our final report, to assist in completing the carrot assessment. By gathering a group of individuals that specialize in different fields, Sustainable Nantucket will be able to answer all indicators with lots of types of knowledge. Our second recommendation is that Sustainable Nantucket should adhere to the 2-convention approach with the group of stakeholders. This is as described previously by Pujeet for data collection and scoring. We also noted in our carrot focus group that many of the indicators are a bit unclear or difficult to understand in their wording. We believe that it would be better to modify the wording of the carrot indicators to better reflect Nantucket's food system. In addition to this, this might also include grouping indicators that are similar as well. Next, I will be listing our recommendations to the North American Food Systems Network. Our first recommendation is to modify the indicator structure of the carrot indicators. This would include looking at which indicators are a little unclear in the way that they are worded, or also, as previously stated in the last recommendations, looking at which indicators might need to be grouped differently. This could also be done by revising the structure of the wording, as well as making the glossary more accessible for defining unclear terms. Furthermore, we've noted in our focus group that many of the carrot scoring indicators are a little unclear as well. We recommend that the North American Food Systems Network amend the wording of the scoring categories to make it more clear which score means what. This would also include adding examples to each score so that it is easier to select the correct score for a specific indicator for Nantucket, as well as other communities too. So what would doing the carrot assessment in Nantucket do? It would help Sustainable Nantucket identify the gaps in policies, practices, and programs on the island. This would also allow smaller nonprofit organizations to apply for grants since more information will be available. Finally, due to our interviews and research, Sustainable Nantucket will be able to form new connections with other organizations that they may have not previously had a relationship with. Now, we'd like to thank all the people and organizations that made our project possible. So first, our sponsor, Sustainable Nantucket, which includes Posey Constable and Ella Potenza. And we'd also like to give a special thanks to Rita Higgins from the Marion Institute, Our House, Fusara's Homemade Italian, Remain Nantucket, Nantucket Historical Association, Young's Bicycle Shop, Nantucket Yacht Club, and all of our interviewees. Now, I'd like to extend that thank you to all of you for being here today. That's all for our presentation.
And if anybody has any questions, please step forward to the mic.
Not really a question, but what a bravo I'd like to extend to our team, our carrot team. They not only arrived on Nantucket, and I had not quite come up with how on earth 4 students coming into a community where we had so much dysfunction, if you will, in terms of attacking gaps in our resiliency of our food system. But also it was suggested to us that this carrot assessment might take, somewhere between 4 months and 18 months. And these guys are only here for a month and a half. So they very quickly identified a way in which they could come up with some results that would help us go forward in completing the assessment. But also in terms of the interviews that they conducted, we have already established a wonderful sense of cohorts that we can work with. And many of those are in the room here, but we're really looking forward to continuing the work that you've established for us. And again, we know that we have gaps, and now it's just up to us to try and figure out the information that will help us fill those gaps. And so thank you so much.
Thank you.
My son's a WPI graduate, so I can attest to the quality of the students and your programs. So looking at Sustainable Nantucket and kind of like self-reliance type approach versus the existing system, which has markets and stuff, is there a point where the carrot and or recommendations kind of, there has to be a relationship between the two for everything to really work? They aren't going to exist independently of each other and be happy. So any thoughts about that interrelationship between the existing food distribution system, which is more corporate based, and a sustainable kind of approach, which is really more localized and kind of meets local needs?
Yeah, so a fun fact about the carrot assessment tool itself is that, as Zoe mentioned, it was created by the North American Food Systems Network, which is all the way out in Indiana. And obviously out there in the Midwest, agriculture is a lot more industrial, it's a lot larger, a lot more commercialized. So here in Nantucket, it's a lot smaller. We have lots of nonprofits like Sustainable leading a lot of the food system policy, Nantucket Resource Partnership, plenty of other nonprofits that are kind of doing the food system policy. As far as carrot goes, carrot, it's designed to be adaptable in the sense you can decide which indicators you want to mark as not applicable. But as far as like identifying the gaps that it kind of provides, I would say it's much more geared towards that large industrial agriculture that might be present out in Indiana, because as Pujit mentioned, a lot of the indicators just state that there is a policy, practice, or program, not is this actually used in the community. So as far as those types of gaps that you can identify with carrot and then further drive the recommendations that you might have towards a smaller decentralized food system, I think this definitely more geared towards the larger and agricultural systems. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, but yeah.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? We have Rin.
Yes. So you mentioned that part of the carrot system is modifying certain indicators to better fit your community. How does that work without skewing the results in a way that makes them meaningless?
I can take this one. Yeah, so so as far as like the carrot tool goes, not applicable is also one of the scores as far as 0 to 3 goes. And then at that point, that specific indicator just isn't really considered in your final resiliency score. As far as like trying to create a more the most thorough resiliency score you can possibly get, this is kind of an issue with carrot because a lot of the specific indicators ask, is there a local food policy council that supports this? Local food policy council that supports this? There's a lot of indicators that ask about a local food policy council. And on Nantucket, we don't really have an active local food policy council. So it's difficult to kind of go through and mark all of those indicators not applicable because then, say for that theme, you're not getting much meaning out of that. So you're absolutely correct on that. As far as our recommendations, we do recommend to the NAFSN, so the creators of carrot, that they do kind of tweak the wording and the ordering of these indicators so that they might be more applicable, less to the agro-industrial system and more towards small communities as well. So, yeah.
I would like to add to that, even when the indicators are modified, I feel like a lot of what carrot is not just getting like a score and that's all. Like a lot of, and this is something Pujit mentioned, it's like the discussions generated by talking about these indicators, I think is what's most important. So it's not even so much the numbers, it's just like getting that discussion going, I think is big.
So you keep mentioning a resiliency score, but you haven't really explained how those are tabulated and what kind of advice those can give if they're just based on numbers. Are they specific as to you need a food bank, or is it just you have a 4 in this?
As Nick mentioned previously, the carrot has 7 different themes, and each of those themes touch on different topics, and each of those themes also get an individual score on top of the overall resiliency score at the end of the completed assessment.
And those are numerical scores?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, team. I guess we have to move on. Give our last team a chance to say their stuff. Thank you. So our last team is they did an assessment of the community pool, working with Nantucket Community School. So we've got Lily, Hayden, Liz, and Justin. So take it away.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Aiden Carter-Frem.
I'm Liz Cherneva.
And I'm Justin Yep.
And this is the Nantucket Community Pool, an assessment of stakeholder opinions. Let's dive in. We will start with some background information and the project goal, and then explain the methods we used for our data collection, the key findings that came from that, and finally, our recommendations and wish list. Just not the right one. The importance of community pools. Drowning is the #1 leading cause of death for children ages 1 to 4, and total drowning deaths have increased in recent years. Additionally, according to a national survey conducted by the CDC, only 38% of Black adults and 28% of Hispanic adults have received formal swimming lessons. This highlights the importance of water safety and swim lessons provided by indoor pools. Also, swimming provides a positive impact for both physical and mental health. We will now discuss recent trends in aquatic programming. A survey was sent out to 628 aquatic establishments across the US, and here are the results. From this first graph, the most commonly offered aquatic programs are leisure swim, learn to swim for children, and lifeguard training, with lap swim not far behind. From this second graph, the most common programs planned to be implemented in the future are for special needs, learn to swim, both adult and youth, and for exercise. The Nantucket Community School was created to oversee the diverse usage of the community pool. They tasked us to explore how the facility might be managed differently to meet future needs. This guided our project goal, which was to evaluate the current usage of the pool and recommend new programs, and also recommend how to optimize current programming.
To meet this goal, we broke our project down into 4 major objectives and completed tasks for each objective. Our first objective was to determine the current uses of the pool regarding scheduling, programming, and hours of operation. Our second objective was to determine the opinions of various stakeholders, such as pool staff, organizations that use the pool for camps, and Nantucket Public School staff in facilities, athletics, physical education, and administration. Our third objective was to determine the opinions of the Nantucket community. And our final objective was to create a list of recommendations based off of the data we received from the first 3 objectives. This list would help to improve the operations of the community pool. Some of our key methods include analyzing registration data from different programs and pool schedules from different seasons, as well as performing qualitative interviews with 18 different stakeholders, staff, and pool users. Finally, we conducted a community survey, which yielded 197 responses. Based on the results of our data, we developed several key findings. First, we want to recognize that we received a lot of positive feedback from our community survey. We found that a lot of pool users found the lifeguards, instructors, and front desk workers to be extremely friendly and helpful. There was also a lot of positive feedback regarding the current programs, especially the Adult Learn to Swim program, as not many communities offer swimming lessons for adults. We also found from registration data in the community survey that there was a high demand for Learn to Swim programs, lap swimming, and family swim. Although the school offers Learn to Swim programs year-round, the demand for these programs are still not being met. The number of people who want to register for these programs are greater than the number of spots in the classes. You can see by this bar graph, with the red bar showing the number of people who are waitlisted, and the blue bar showing the number of people who are able to participate. Another finding we had from the community survey is that there is a want for weekend hours to be expanded. Currently, on Saturdays, the pool is open from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. As starred in the figure, our survey shows that the pool users want the expansion of morning hours more for lap swimming, shown with the blue bar, and afternoon hours more for family swim, showed by the red bar. Similarly, the pool is currently closed on Sundays, but our survey showed a desire for more operational hours on Sundays. As starred in the figure, respondents indicated that they would use the pool in the mornings, midday, and afternoon for both lap swimming and family swim.
Our next key finding involves scheduling challenges for the pool facility. The pool has limited lifeguards and instructors, which makes it difficult to expand program size and frequency. A portion of last summer's weekly schedule is shown on screen, which is split into 6 lanes and 15-minute increments from open to close. From 9 a.m. to 1:45 p.m., there is significant competition for pool space between multiple camps. These camps are scheduled to take up all 6 lanes, but rarely do so, which results in idle pool space. Additionally, the demand for lap swimming is the greatest during early morning hours, but these hours are filled with swim groups on weekdays and closed on Saturdays to prevent pool staff from working overtime. Outside of these summer months, the pool offers complimentary family swim sessions on Saturday afternoons. These sessions are very popular and often reach capacity, requiring families to sign up online. Family swim's capacity is 25. This is because 25 is the maximum number of swimmers a single lifeguard can oversee at once. Weekday drop-ins, where families pay a fee, are also offered, but are less known since on the lane availability schedule, these time slots are not advertised as well as the sponsored one. As shown on screen, complimentary sessions are highlighted while drop-ins are just abbreviated as FS.
Our next finding was the demand for adaptive and therapeutic programs. This was mainly based on our survey results, where respondents were able to express their interest in the pool incorporating adaptive and therapeutic programs. Currently, the pool does not offer any adaptive programs for anyone with disabilities. As for therapeutics, the pool does offer aquasize, but does not have a rehabilitation program. We were able to, as you're looking at the screen, you're able to see that aqua therapy was our most chosen want to see program, along with many of the respondents who stated they were also content with the programs. We were able to conclude this demand in correlation with our findings from organizations. We found there was a high demand for programming of outside organizations. This was based on our interviews with Nantucket Star and Nantucket Boys and Girls Club. We learned from both organizations that the pool has faced challenges accommodating organizations into their pool schedule due to high demand, limited space, and time availability. We also had on our survey some respondents indicate that they would love to see more of these programs seen at the pool.
Another of our key findings was that we found that patrons have difficulties with registering for programs such as Family Swim and Learn to Swim. From our survey, we found that 38% of respondents said that they were unable to register for programs. Apart from issues with capacity, there are flaws with the registration system itself. For instance, the registration times occurs in the middle of the workday and on weekdays, meaning that working adults and parents are unable to sign up for these programs. There are also issues with navigation on the website. For instance, parents with multiple children are unable to sign up multiple kids at once, as the card system only allows you to sign up one child at once. We also found that there were concerns with the locker room and shower facilities. Currently, there are only one male and one female locker room with one shower and toilet each. This is not enough for the demand and of the community, resulting in high traffic and bottlenecks during the end of programs and open swim hours. The high usage also means that the community also wants more cleaning in the locker rooms. The community would also, the locker rooms also are separated during these times into groups of adults and groups of children, as they cannot use the locker room at the same time due to safety concerns. This makes scheduling programming much more difficult and reduces the amount of time that people can use the locker room. The varsity locker rooms cannot be used to solve this problem, as they're directly connected to the high school. The high school, who is a closed campus, so this would create a security problem.
Here we will discuss our recommendations to the Nantucket Community School about improvements that can be made to operations and programs at the community pool. Our first recommendation is for the school to optimize the pool schedule to better suit the needs of the community. Our next recommendation would be to add adaptive and therapeutic programs to the programming offerings to include everyone on the island. Our third recommendation is to have extended hours on the weekend. We learned from our survey and interview with staff that it would be beneficial to have the pool open on Sundays and longer on Saturdays. Our fourth recommendation is to improve registration equity. We learned from our survey that people were struggling registering their kids for Learn to Swim programs and Family Swim. Our last recommendation is to improve website navigation. We learned from our survey certain respondents had trouble finding certain programs and events on the website.
These are a list of wish list recommendations that we have. These are less feasible than the previous recommendations, but are still worth considering. Our first recommendation is to improve facility repairs and maintenance. By increasing the cleaning in the locker rooms and upgrading the drainage system, the locker rooms can be much more cleaner. Our second recommendation is to expand the locker room and shower facilities. By having larger locker rooms and more showers, it will be able to meet the demands of the community and would also increase the flexibility of what programs can be run at the same time. And while we understand it's unlikely, we recommend to build a second pool. Building a second pool would allow for more programs to be run, more open swim hours to be held, more locker rooms and larger locker rooms to be built. It would also allow for the implementation of new modern technology such as UV filtration systems.
Finally, we would like to thank our wonderful sponsors for all of their help and efforts in this project. So thank you, Alicia, Lindsay, and James. We would also like to thank all of the staff at the pool. They were a tremendous support in our project and really helped with our field research. And finally, we would like to thank all of you for listening. We know that we're the last presentation, so thank you for sitting through.
Okay, does anyone have a question for the pool team? Alicia, Lindsay, do you want to have anything you want to say? James.
How did you guys ensure to gauge a broad range of perspectives to inform your survey responses?
So as we said, our survey got 197 responses. We got a good amount of people. We did this with the help of our sponsors. We were able to send the survey out to all of the pool members as well as some former members. We were able to send the survey also out to anyone who had registered for a program in the past few years. With the help of our sponsors, we were able to blast it on their Instagram as well as on the current website. So we were able to get more. We also had an incentive for our survey, and one person won a month-long free adult membership. I'm sure that helped as well. After the first week that our survey was out, the data was definitely skewed a lot. We had a lot more members than non-members who answered the survey, and a lot of older adults rather than parents. So we went around with a flyer during some of the club swim and the family swim, as well as children's swimming lessons, and we did some in-person surveying to make sure we were hearing from that side of the community.
Awesome. You mentioned that some parents have struggled to register their kids for classes. Could you speak more on that?
Yes, thank you. For registration, as we mentioned, it's a time of day, and any of the parents who work may have trouble like sorting it out in their schedule. The classes also fill up within seconds. Part of this is just because of the high demand from the amount of people who want to do the swim lessons. And part of it is because people who are waitlisted have priority. So a class that may be for 11 kids is really, there's only 3 slots that are open because there's 8 people who were on the wait list last time. We talked with another community before coming here about how they dealt with registration inequity, and they switched to an in-person registration system. But there's pros and cons to online or in person, because online you may not be able to get someone who doesn't have access to a computer or a phone, but in person you may not be able to reach people who don't have access to a car. So there's pros and cons to both.
Thank you.
Sorry guys, just wanted to say you guys did an absolutely fantastic job. It's been really fun working with you guys and kind of getting down into the nitty-gritty with a lot of this stuff. One quick question I would like to propose, I don't know if you guys have got this data, but did you find in terms of registration issues, there was any correlation between a desktop type registration versus using like a mobile device, like an iPhone or iPad to do the registration, if that affected anything? Thank you. Great job, guys.
Unfortunately, that wasn't one of the questions that we asked, but we did hear from some people when we were surveying online that they had trouble accessing the website on their phone. So I'm sure they had more trouble registering from mobile devices rather than desktops.
So you mentioned that there are pool members. What is the difference between a member and a non-member in terms of their accesses and privileges?
So there's multiple different types of membership. There's family membership, adult, youth, and senior. And anyone who has a membership has access to the pool for lap swimming for free. Anyone who's a non-member still has access to lap swimming and open swim, but they have to pay a $5 drop-in fee.
Is there does being a member provide any advantage in terms of registration and other activities that are currently filling up?
I don't believe so, other than you get a newsletter every month and you may be more aware of programs from that newsletter.
Thank you.
On slide 18, you mentioned one of the wish list items would be to build a second pool. I understand this might be outside of the scope of what you guys did in the project, but do you have any idea of how you would go about doing that? For example, where the location would be and a general time frame of it?
I think I'll speak ideally in a perfect world where there's unlimited funding and resources. The ideal location would also be on the campus that the high school and the middle school is. It's right down the street from the elementary school, but ideally it would be in a separate building, still right accessible to those buildings, but separate. That way it does not interfere with the closed campus, and it would also ideally would have its own custodian and own building supervisor who can open and close so that they can remain open during days where, like federal holidays or Sundays, where the school is otherwise closed.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any more questions from anyone? All righty, I guess that wraps it up. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. And before everybody leaves, I'd just like to say a note of thanks myself for my colleague, Melissa Bells, who worked with me and the students for the last term and this term, so thank you for all your help with the teams. I'd like to thank all our project sponsors. We couldn't do these projects, obviously, without sponsors. We're delighted to work with you all and look forward to coming back and working with some of you again in the future years. Thanks to our audience, both here in the room, online. Appreciate you joining us today. If anybody does have any follow-up questions, you can certainly send them to me. My email again is just golding@wpi.edu. The project materials, so the reports, these presentation slides and so forth, will all be available on the Nantucket Project Center website, probably sometime this weekend, as soon as I can get them up there. So you'll be able to retrieve those documents and so forth from that website. Charlie, can I go back one slide? Thank you. So other thanks I'd like to make today. Thank you to the Nantucket Yacht Club who puts the students up in a wonderful dormitory downtown. So we appreciate that. Young's Bicycle, Harvey's here today. Jasper's hard at work, but thanks to Young's Bicycles for Bicycle Shop for giving all of us bikes for the duration while we're here. It's the main way we get around the island, and the weather smiled on us this year. The students complained when it rained, what, twice in the last 7 weeks? You should try it some other years. It rains a lot more. Now I've lost the thing again. Charlie, thank you. Don't need a picture of me, just leave that up there. I'd like to thank Remain. They underwrote our scavenger hunt that we do every year with the students, so we appreciate that. The Nantucket Historical Association gave us access to the Whaling Museum, which was great, and Emma Young also helped organize the scavenger hunt, so we appreciate that. The Shipwreck and Life-Saving Museum, as I said earlier, I'm hoping we might actually have a project with them next year. We've talked about it for years. We'll see if it comes through. But they also gave us a wonderful tour of the museum a couple of weeks back. The Nantucket High School, Matt Hunt has generously for the last several years given the students all access, those that want, to the gym. Believe it or not, students go all over the place, and one of the first things they're worried about when they get to London or Bangkok is where they're going to have access to a gym. And we're very lucky in Nantucket because the high school gives us access whilst they're here. We had a nice trip out to Pauline Procher's place, our house, and Fuzero's kindly provided us all with a nice dinner, so I appreciate that. And again, Charlie and his colleagues at NCTV, we appreciate all the work that you do to put this out to a wider community audience. And last but not least, thanks to all our students for all your hard work last term and this term. It's been a pleasure. Melissa and I have enjoyed working with you. We hope you'll keep in touch and tell us about your future endeavors. So, thanks again, and thanks one and all. Bye now.